Hey guys! Tonight we sweep through the towering stone gates of a medieval castle, where the air smells of wood smoke and damp velvet, and torchlight dances on tapestries woven with tales of conquest. Picture yourself gliding down a grand hall, your silk gown brushing the cold flagstones, as lords in fur-trimmed cloaks whisper behind gloved hands. You're here to uncover why being a medieval queen was a nightmare, a life of gilded cages, deadly risks, and relentless power plays in the 11th to 15th centuries, where the crown was as much a shackle as a prize. Trust me, you probably wouldn't survive a single day dodging court intrigue, let alone the weight of that jeweled diadem. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your city and local time. I love knowing where you're drifting off from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in this cavernous hall, the clink of goblets and a minstrel's lute filling the air. But the glamour hides a darker truth. It's the 13th century, and you're a queen. Let's call you Eleanor of a European realm. Your throne a velvet trap in a world of knights, bishops, and scheming barons. Being a queen wasn't just about ruling. It was surviving a gauntlet of politics, betrayal, and expectations, where every step could be your last. A far cry from the brutal servitude we explored or the deadly medicine we endured in other tales. You're here to peel back the layers of this royal nightmare, starting with the court that shaped it, a glittering web of ambition and danger. Let's ground this with a mainstream fact. Medieval queens were central figures in European courts, from the 11th to 15th centuries, often acting as consorts, regents, or mediators, as noted in chronicles like those of Orderic Vitalis' 12th century. You wielded influence through marriage alliances, diplomacy, or motherhood, but your power was precarious, tied to your husband's favor or your son's throne, with rivals ever ready to topple you. You're nodding at a duke's bow, his smile masking a plot, and you're tense, knowing your crown depends on navigating this court. The hall's splendor a stark contrast to the dangers we'll face: childbirth, betrayal, isolation as perilous as the feudal lash we felt in serfdom's tale. Your queenship a throne of thorns. Now, here's a quirky tidbit. Queens often wore crown veils, delicate silk nets studded with gems, meant to signal divine favor, but so heavy they caused headaches. In the 13th century, royal inventories list these: a must for court appearances. You're adjusting yours, its weight pinching your temples, and grinning. It's like a medieval Instagram filter, flashier than those lords' tokens we wore as serfs. You're half tempted to fling it off, but the courtier's eyes and the king's your husband, let's call him Henry, stern glance keep you poised. The veil's burden a hint of the nightmare awaiting, like the healer's leeches that drained us in another time. But not everyone agrees on why queenship was so nightmarish. Historians still argue whether the dangers stemmed from political instability or the gendered limits of power, with no clear cause in royal charters or chronicles. Some, citing court intrigues, say queens were vulnerable in a volatile feudal system. Others, noting misogynistic laws, argue their lack of autonomous authority made them targets, like the church's grip we'll see later. You're gliding past a whispering baron, his words veiled but sharp, and wondering if this court's a battlefield or a cage. The healer's den we fled, now a royal hall where intrigue cuts deeper than a lancet. The wedding night's fears we faced a softer dread than this crowned peril. Your role a gamble in a game of thrones. Step closer to the throne and notice the details. The cool silver of your goblet, The faint strum of the lute, the way the veil's gems catch the torchlight. A dazzling lie. This hall's a stage, like the manor's feasts we served in serfdom. But it's a deadly one, where every gesture is watched. The feudal laws of lords, now a courtly dance of power. You're feeling the paradox, you're a queen, exalted with titles, but trapped, your influence fragile. The village's scorn, we walked through a shadow compared to this scrutiny. You're thinking of that crown veil, a symbol of glory, and how it ties to a world that crowns you but chains you, like the laudanum vials that numbed other pains we met in Victorian times. Time for a quick joke. Why was the crown veil so heavy? Because it carried Eleanor's nightmares in style. You're smirking, but it's quiet, the king's cough stifles it, his gaze a warning. You're catching a lady-in-waiting's sly glance, her loyalty uncertain, and sensing the stakes. Queenship isn't just power, it's survival, where a misstep, wrong ally, wrong word could mean ruin. The wedding night's legal chains, we felt a faint kin to this royal bind. You're wondering about the queen who sat here before, if she outwitted the court or fell, her story lost in the tapestries. The fear's not just of failure, it's of erasure. A life where you're more symbol than soul as you ease toward a velvet curtain. The baron's whisper trailing, you're craving a moment's peace. The hall's warmth now stifling, your role as Eleanor a crown you can't shed. You're starting to see the bigger picture. This isn't just a court, it's a crucible, where being a queen was a nightmare of power and peril, driven by ambition and betrayal. You're thinking of those crown veils, masking pain like serfs task chance masked defiance, and how they reflect a society that exalted queens but broke them. You're wondering about the queen you'll be, if you'll navigate this web or snap, and the thousands who've worn this crown before. Their lives woven in the hall's glow. The torch dims, the curtain beckons, and you're carrying this royal dread, ready to explore the power games that made your throne a trap. A chessboard as cruel as the court's gaze. One last chuckle. Why was the hall so grand? Because it hid Eleanor's fears better. You're slipping behind the curtain, the lute's hum fading, as the court's pulse quickens. With the queen's nightmare heavy in your heart, you're ready to dive into the political chess games that ensnared her. A web as tight as the veil's net. You're slipping through the velvet curtain into a dimly lit antechamber of the medieval castle. The air heavy with the scent of wax from dripping candles and the faint musk of parchment. Stacked on a carved oak table, the distant lute from the great hall we left behind is a soft hum. But here, the rustle of cloaks and low whispers of barons plodding by a narrow window cut the silence. You're Eleanor, a queen in the 13th century, your crown veil pinching as you clutch a sealed letter from a rival lord, its wax seal glinting like a warning. The court's glittering facade we glimpsed is a mask for a deadly game, where you're a pawn in power struggles that could topple your throne. You're here to explore the political chess games that ensnared medieval queens, the ruthless maneuvers that made your life a nightmare, a web as perilous as the feudal lash we felt in serfdom's tale. This is the board of betrayal, and you're feeling its tension, sharp as the letter's edge, heavy as the crown's weight on your brow. The mainstream fact is that medieval queens were often political pawns in European courts from the 11th to 15th centuries, used in marriage alliances or diplomatic schemes to secure power, as documented in chronicles like those of Matthew Paris' 13th century. You were married to King Henry to bind realms or quell wars, your value tied to treaties, dowries, or heirs. But this made you a target for rivals, barons, foreign kings, even your husband's kin who sought to control or dethrone you. You're scanning the letter, its words hinting at a plot to favor a rival heir, and you're wary. knowing one wrong move could spark rebellion. The hall's courtiers we navigated, now pieces on a chessboard. The bloodlettings drain we endured. In medicine's tale, a faint echo of this bloodless but deadly game. Your queenship a move in others' strategies. But here's a quirky tidbit. Queens sometimes used cipher rings, silver bands etched with secret codes, to pass encrypted messages to allies, dodging spies in court. In the 13th century, royal jewelers' records note these, crafted for discreet intrigue. You're twisting one on your finger, its grooves, hiding a reply to the letter, and grinning it's like a medieval WhatsApp. Sneakier than those crown veils we adjusted last time. You're half tempted to slip it to a trusted lady-in-waiting, but the Baron's whispers and Henry's distant shout keep you cautious. The power game's stakes as high as the healer's knife we faced. A plot no ring can unravel. Historians still argue whether queens were active players or mere pieces in these political games, with no clear role in court records or diplomatic letters. Some, citing figures like Eleanor of Aquitaine, say you wielded real influence, shaping alliances. Others, noting legal constraints, argue your power was limited, manipulated by male kin. Like the church's grip we'll see later. You're folding the letter, its seal cracking, and wondering if you're a queen or a puppet. The great hall's intrigues, the stable's lash, and the village's scorn we've faced, now a fevered plot you must outwit. The wedding night's powerlessness. We felled a softer trap than this chessboard. You're thrown a square where every move's a risk. Time for a quick joke. Why was the cipher ring so sly? Because it hit Eleanor's plans in style. You're chuckling, but it's hushed, the Baron's cough drowns it. Their eyes glinting. You're tucking the letter into your sleeve, the antechamber's chill seeping in. As you take in the scene, picture the scene. The antechamber's a hushed lair, with flickering candles, a tapestry of warring knights, and the Baron's cloak swirling like storm clouds. A far cry from the hall's loot-filled feasts or the healer's den. You're not in the field's mud or the church's pews. You're in a nest of intrigue, where political games rule. You're a prize, your marriage tied lands. Your womb promises heirs, but also a threat. Your influence a spark for rebellion. The humoral theory's cuts we survived, now a subtler slice of betrayal. The feudal system's yoke a courtly dance, like the ignorance that bound souls in other tales. The games aren't just plots. They're a noose, tightening with each whispered deal. The laudanum-like herbs we met, a faint echo as this intrigue poisons your peace, though you stand. Eleanor's grit your core, step closer to the window, and notice the details. The cool glass under your palm, the faint creak of the table, the way the ring's code catches the candlelight. A secret in the gloom. This antechamber's a crucible, like those task chants we hummed for serfs. But it's cunning. A place where your crown's a target. You're thinking of that crown veil, how it masked your dread, and how these games, alliances, betrayals, heirs mirror the bloodlettings drain, each plot a wound to your power. You're wondering why your throne's a bargaining chip, why Baron's plot when you broker peace. The myths of noble lords we heard a cruel kin to this treachery, strong but deadly. You're craving control, but the letter's words and the Baron's schemes are your reality, the system a trap, like the Victorian court's intrigues we met. Here's another chuckle. Why was the letter so sneaky? Because it loved plotting Eleanor's fall? You're smiling, but its grim a lady's rustle pulls you back, her loyalty a question. You're also connecting the dots, the hall's feasts, the feudal chains, the yard's toil, the stable's lash, the undercroft's hunger, the village's scorn, the square's spells, the church's dogma, the bloodletting's drain, the bruised poison, the surgery's cut they've led here. where power games are the queen's nightmare. Not just a role, but a life gambled. Like the wedding night's surrender we've faced. You're remembering those cruel tricks, a spark of defiance for serfs, and how they align with this ring's code. Small fights in a crushing world. You're thinking of other queens consorts, regents their thrones like yours. Each plot a shared wound, their pain a mirror to the struggle we've carried since the veil's first pinch. Now tangled in this web of intrigue as you slip the ring off, the baron's voices rising. You're aching for a move that's yours. The antechamber's gloom a cage. The power games a weight you can't shed, like the letter's seal. You're starting to see the bigger picture. This isn't just politics, it's a battlefield. Making queenship a nightmare by ensnaring you in others' schemes, driven by ambition and betrayal. You're thinking of those cipher rings, hiding secrets, like the laudanum-like herbs that dulled other struggles, and how they reflect a society that crowned queens but played them. You're wondering about the queen you'll be, if you'll outwit this board or fall, and the thousands who've plotted here before, their lives lost in the whispers. The candle dims, the hall calls, and you're carrying this treacherous game, ready to face the deadly risks of childbirth, a burden as cruel as the baron's plots. One last joke to ease us forward. Why was the chessboard so cruel? Because it checkmated Eleanor's dreams. You're stepping from the window, the letter hidden, as the antechamber's hush deepens. With political games heavy in your heart, you're ready to witness the childbirth burdens that threatened your life, a nightmare as deadly as the throne. You're lying on a canopied bed in a candlelit royal chamber, the air thick with the scent of lavender from sachets, and the faint iron tang of blood-soaked linens piling up at your feet. The velvet curtains muffle the distant clink of goblets from the great hall, but here, the midwife's urgent whispers and your own ragged breaths fill the space. You're Eleanor, a queen in the 13th century, your silk gown soaked with sweat as you grip the bedpost, labor pains ripping through you. The political chess games we navigated in the antechamber now a distant scheme. Compared to this life or death struggle, you're here to witness the deadly risks of childbirth that made being a medieval queen a nightmare. A physical ordeal that could end in your grave, as brutal as the feudal lash we felt in serfdom's tale. This is the crucible of creation, and you're feeling its agony, sharp as the pain's next wave, heavy as the crown you set aside. The mainstream fact is that childbirth was a leading cause of death for medieval women, including queens, from the 11th to 15th centuries, with up to 20% of mothers dying due to infection, hemorrhage, or complications, as noted in medical texts like the Trotula 12th century. As a queen, your duty was to produce heirs to secure the dynasty, but each pregnancy risked your life, with crude medical practices and no anesthesia heightening the danger. You're clenching your teeth as the midwife presses a cloth to your brow, her hands trembling, and you're terrified, knowing this birth could kill you or the child. The cipher ring's secrets we guarded now meaningless against this primal threat. The bloodlettings drain we endured in medicine's tale a faint echo of this blood you're losing. Your queenship a gamble with every contraction. But here's a quirky tidbit. Queens often used birthing girdles, parchment strips inscribed with prayers to Saint Margaret, tied around your waist to ease labor, believed to invoke divine protection. In the 13th century, monastic records list these, lent to royal mothers for a fee. You're feeling one strapped tight, its ink smudged, and grinning through the pain. It's like a medieval epidural, flimsier than those crown veils we adjusted in the hall. You're half tempted to clutch it tighter, praying for a miracle, but the midwife's grim face and the pain's surge keep you grounded. The childbirth's risks as real as the healer's knife we faced, a peril no parchment can ward off. Historians still argue whether childbirth's dangers were amplified for queens due to political pressure or similar to those of common women, with no clear distinction in medical accounts or royal chronicles. Some, citing dynastic demands, say your need for heirs led to riskier interventions. Others, noting universal medical ignorance, argue all women faced equal peril, like the church's grip we'll see later. You're gasping as another contraction hits, the chamber spinning, and wondering if your crown makes this worse or just mirrors every mother's fate. The great hall's plots, the stable's lash, and the village's scorn we face now a fevered birth you might not survive. The wedding night's physical toll we felt a prelude to this agony. Your life a thread in the midwife's hands. Time for a quick joke. Why was the birthing girdle so holy? Because it prayed harder than Eleanor's screams. You're chuckling, but it's choked. The midwife's shout drowns it, her urgency a warning. You're gripping the bedpost, the linen's red, as you take in the scene. Picture the scene. The chamber's a flickering vault, with embroidered hangings, a silver basin of water, and the midwife's tools, knives, cloth strewn like a battlefield. A far cry from the antechamber's whispers or the healer's den. You're not in the field's mud or the church's pews. You're in a royal crucible, where childbirth's a trial. The midwife's coaxing, urging you to push, while a lady-in-waiting chants prayers, claiming they'll guard you, but the pain's relentless. The humoral theory's cuts we survive now, a childbirth steeped in ignorance. The feudal systems yoke a maternal duty, like the ignorance that bound souls in other tales. The risks aren't just pain, they're death, with puerperal fever or bleeding as likely as survival. The laudanum-like herbs we met a faint hope as this birth threatens all, though you push. Eleanor's grit your core, step closer to the basin, and notice the details. The warm water's coppery scent, the faint rustle of the curtains, the way the girdle's parchment chafes, a frail shield. This chamber's a prison, like those task chants we hummed for serfs, but it's visceral. A place where your body's broken for dynasty's sake. You're thinking of that cipher ring, how it hid secrets, and how childbirth blood screams. Prayers mirrors the plague's fixes we despaired, each push a chain to a royal hope. You're wondering why your heir costs your life, why the midwife trusts charms over skill. The myths of noble lords we heard a cruel kin to this ordeal, strong but deadly. You're craving life, but the blood's flowing, the system a trap, like the Victorian childbirth fears we met. Here's another chuckle. Why was the midwife so frantic? Because she feared Eleanor's crown more than her pain. You're smiling, but it's grim. The lady's prayer pulls you back, her faith a warning. You're also connecting the dots. The hall's feasts, the feudal chains, the yard's toil, the stable's lash, the undercroft's hunger, the village's scorn, the square's spells, the church's dogma, the bloodletting's drain, the bruise poison, the surgery's cut, the antechamber's plots they've led here, where childbirth's the queen's nightmare, not just a birth but a life risked, like the wedding night's surrender we faced. You're remembering those cruel tricks, a spark of defiance for serfs, and how they align with this girdle's prayers, small fights in a crushing world. You're thinking of other queens consorts, mothers their births like yours, each scream, a shared wound, their pain a mirror to the struggle we've carried since the veil's first pinch. Now torn by this deadly labor, as you push again, the midwife's hands steadying. You're screaming for survival, the chamber's candles a haze. The childbirth's risk a weight you can't shed, like the fever's fire. You're starting to see the bigger picture. This isn't just a birth, it's a crucible, making queenship a nightmare by risking your life for heirs, driven by duty and danger. You're thinking of those birthing girdles, promising safety, like the laudanum-like herbs that dulled other struggles, and how they reflect a society that crowned queens but bled them. You're wondering about the queen you'll be, if you'll outlast this birth or fade, and the thousands who've labored here before, their lives lost in the linens. The dawn brightens, the chamber blurs, and you're carrying this deadly burden, ready to uncover the betrayals that shadowed your throne, a treachery as cruel as the pain's grip. One last joke to ease us forward. Why was the birth so fierce? Because it loved Eleanor's heir more. You're collapsing on the bed, the midwife's voice fading, as the chamber's gloom thickens. With childbirth's dangers heavy in your heart, you're ready to face the betrayals that threatened your life, a nightmare as deadly as the throne. You're pacing the stone floor of a private solar in the medieval castle, the air cool with the scent of polished oak, and the faint spice of cloves from a pomander dangling at your waist. The flicker of a single taper casts long shadows on a tapestry of unicorns. And you're Eleanor, a queen in the 13th century, your silk gown whispering as you clutch a crumpled note slipped under your door. Its scrawl warning of a plot against you. The childbirth's agony we endured in the royal chamber is a raw memory, your body still weak. But the antechamber's chess games have sharpened into a deadlier threat. You're here to uncover the treachery that shadowed medieval queens, the constant betrayals that made your life a nightmare, a danger as sharp as the feudal lash we felt in serfdom's tale. This is the sting of disloyalty, and you're feeling its chill. Heavy as the note's weight in your hand, sharp as the dagger you now keep hidden in your sleeve. The mainstream fact is that medieval queens faced frequent betrayal from the 11th to 15th centuries, with courtiers, kin, or even husbands plotting against them to seize power or favor rival heirs, as documented in chronicles like those of Jean Froissart 14th century. Your position tied to alliances, heirs, or regency we saw in the hall made you a target for barons, rival queens, or disloyal vassals, with assassination, imprisonment, or exile as real threats. You're scanning the note, its words implicating a trusted lady-in-waiting in a scheme to poison your wine, and you're reeling, knowing one false step could end you. The cipher rings secrets we guarded in the antechamber, now a frail shield. Against this treachery, the bloodlettings drain. We faced in medicine's tale a slow death compared to this swift betrayal. Your queenship a beacon for knives in the dark. But here's a quirky tidbit. Queens sometimes used taste testers, servants who sampled your food to detect poison, a grim precaution in royal kitchens. In the 13th century, court records note these tasters, often young pages paid extra for the risk. You're picturing one at your table, a nervous boy sipping your goblet, and grinning. It's like a medieval food critic, riskier than those birthing girdles we clutched in labor. You're half tempted to double his wages, hoping he'll save you. But the note's warning and a creak outside the door keep you alert. The betrayal's threat as real as the healer's knife we faced. A plot no taster can thwart. Historians still argue whether betrayals were driven by personal ambition or structural flaws in medieval power systems, with no clear motive in royal letters or chronicles. Some, citing court rivalries, say individual greed fueled plots against you. Others, noting feudal instability, argue the lack of centralized authority made treachery inevitable, like the church's grip we'll see later. You're hiding the note in your bodice, the solar's silence deafening, and wondering if this lady's betrayal is her own or a baron's scheme. The great hall's plots, the childbirth's pain, and the village's scorn we face, now a fevered betrayal you must outwit. The wedding night's powerlessness we felt a softer trap than this dagger's edge. Your life a gamble on loyalty's thin thread. Time for a quick joke. Why was the taste tester so nervous? Because he sipped Eleanor's doom with lunch. You're chuckling, but its hushed a guard's step outside drowns it. His allegiance uncertain. You're pacing faster, the pomander swaying, as you take in the scene. Picture the scene. The solar's a quiet fortress, with a carved chair, a small hearth's embers, and a locked chest of letters. A far cry from the chamber's blood-soaked linens or the antechamber's whispers. You're not in the field's mud or the church's pews. You're in a lair of suspicion, where betrayal's a constant shadow. You're a queen, but also prey. Your throne tied to the alliances we played in the antechamber, drawing traitors. Like moths, from ladies plotting poison to barons backing rival heirs. The humoral theory's cuts we survived, now a subtler slice of treachery. The feudal systems yoke a courtly knife, like the ignorance that bound souls in other tales. The betrayals aren't just plots. They're a noose, tightening with each false smile. The laudanum like herbs we met a faint echo as this treachery poisons your trust. Though you stand. Eleanor's grit your core, step closer to the chest and notice the details. The cool iron of its lock, the faint crackle of the hearth, the way the note's ink smudges under your thumb, a mark of its truth. This solar's a refuge, like those task chants we hummed for serfs. But it's a trap, a place where your crown's a target. You're thinking of that cipher ring, how it hid secrets, and how betrayal's poison, whispers, coups mirror the childbirth's risks we faced, each plot a wound to your reign. You're wondering why loyalty's so rare, why your ladies turn when you've shared your bread. The myths of noble lords we heard, a cruel kin to this deceit, strong but deadly. You're craving safety, but the creek's closer, the system a death trap, like the Victorian court's intrigues we met. Here's another chuckle. Why was the note so secret? Because it loved stabbing Eleanor's back. You're smiling, but it's grim, the guard's shadow pulls you back. His sword a question. You're also connecting the dots. The hall's feasts, the feudal chains, the yard's toil, the stable's lash, the undercroft's hunger, the village's scorn, the square's spells, the church's dogma, the bloodletting's drain, the bruise poison, the surgery's cut, the antechamber's plots, the chamber's birth they've led here, where betrayal's the queen's nightmare, not just a role but a life hunted, like the wedding night's surrender we faced. You're remembering those cruel tricks, a spark of defiance for serfs, and how they align with this dagger's conceal, small fights in a crushing world. You're thinking of other queens consorts, regents their thrones like yours, each betrayal a shared wound, their pain a mirror to the struggle we've carried since the veil's first pinch. Now pierced by this treachery's blade, as you slip the dagger closer, the door's creak growing louder. You're aching for trust. The solar's glow a cage, the betrayal's sting a weight you can't shed, like the wound's rot. You're starting to see the bigger picture. This isn't just treachery, it's a gauntlet, making queenship a nightmare by surrounding you with knives, driven by greed and chaos. You're thinking of those taste testers, risking death, like the laudanum-like herbs that dulled other struggles, and how they reflect a society that crowned queens but hunted them. You're wondering about the queen you'll be, if you'll outwit this plot or fall. And the thousands who've stood here before, their lives lost in the shadows. The taper dims, the hall calls, and you're carrying this deadly shadow, ready to navigate the suffocating court etiquette, a burden as cruel as the note's warning. One last joke to ease us forward. Why was betrayal so quiet? Because it loved Eleanor's fall more. You're stepping to the door, the dagger ready, as the solar's hush deepens, with treachery's shadow heavy in your heart. You're ready to face the court etiquette that can find you, a nightmare as tight as the throne's grip. You're gliding through the bustling great hall of the medieval castle, the air rich with the scent of roasted venison and the sharp tang of spiced mead. From goblets raised in toasts, torchlight glints off polished armor, and courtiers in velvet bow as you pass, their smiles as calculated as the steps of a pavane. You're Eleanor, a queen in the 13th century, your crown veil a heavy net, the hidden dagger from the solar's treachery tucked close, its cold steel a reminder of the betrayal we uncovered. The childbirth's agony and the antechamber's plots linger, but now you're bound by a different chain, the suffocating rules of court etiquette. You're here to navigate the rigid protocols that confined medieval queens, a nightmare of decorum that caged your every move, as oppressive as the feudal lash we felt in serfdom's tale. This is the dance of duty, and you're feeling its weight, tight as the corset beneath your gown, sharp as the courtier's watchful eyes. The mainstream fact is that medieval court etiquette, from the 11th to 15th centuries, imposed strict behavioral codes on queens, dictating speech, dress, and conduct to uphold royal dignity, as detailed in courtesy books like the Book of the Courtier, later adapted from 13th century norms. You were expected to embody grace, piety, and obedience, every gesture sitting, smiling, speaking scripted to reflect the crown's majesty, with any breach risking scandal or loss of favor. You're offering a measured nod to a visiting earl, your hands folded just so, and you're stifled, knowing a wrong word could fuel the plots we dodged in the solar. The childbirth's risks we survived a physical pain compared to this social prison. The humoral theory's cuts we endured in medicine's tale a blunt harm beside this delicate trap. Your queenship a performance you can't falter. But here's a quirky tidbit. Queens were often required to wear state gloves, embroidered, silk gloves donned for formal events, so stiff they limited hand movement, symbolizing restraint. In the 13th century, royal wardrobe accounts list these, custom-made for ceremonies. You're tugging at yours, their threads pinching, and grinning. It's like a medieval Fitbit, tracking your poise, fussier than those cipher rings we twisted in the antechamber. You're half tempted to slip them off, craving a free gesture. But the earl's bow and a lady's sharp glance keep you rigid, the etiquette's grip as firm as the taste testers we relied on, a rule no glove can soften. Historians still argue whether court etiquette was a tool to control queens or a cultural ideal to elevate the monarchy, with no clear purpose in court records or chronicles. Some, citing gendered norms, say it was designed to curb your influence, enforcing submission. Others, noting royal symbolism, argue it aimed to glorify the crown. Like the church's grip we'll see later. You're stepping toward the high table, your smile practiced, and wondering if these rules cage you or the court, the great hall's intrigues, the childbirth's toll, and the solar's betrayal we faced, now a fevered dance you must perfect. The wedding night's constraints we felt a softer bind than this protocol. Your freedom upon indecorum's game. Time for a quick joke. Why were the state gloves so tight? Because they squeezed Eleanor's spirit flat. You're chuckling, but it's hushed a minstrel's strum drowns it, and you're wary of a baron's smirk. You're adjusting your veil, the hall's heat rising, as you take in the scene. Picture the scene. The hall's a vibrant stage, with trestle tables laden with feasts, banners of lions and crosses swaying, and courtiers weaving like chess pieces. A far cry from the solar's tense whispers or the chamber's bloody linens. You're not in the field's mud or the church's pews. You're in a gilded cage, where etiquette's the law. You're expected to glide, not walk, to speak in measured tones, to dine with precise bites, every move a signal of your worth. The political games we played now a public performance, The feudal systems yoke a courtly script, like the ignorance that bound souls in other tales. The rules aren't just manners, they're chains, binding your voice and will. The laudanum like herbs we met a faint echo as this decorum stifles your soul. Though you move, Eleanor's grit your core, step closer to the table and notice the details. The cool silver of a spoon, the faint clink of goblets, the way the glove's silk chafes. A mark of your restraint. This hall's a theater, like those task chants we hummed for serfs. But it's suffocating. A place where your crown's a script. You're thinking of that dagger, how it guards your life, and how etiquette curtsies, silences, smiles mirrors. The betrayal's shadow we faced, each rule a wound to your freedom. You're wondering why your grace must be flawless, why a laugh could spark scandal. The myths of noble lords we heard a cruel kin to this pageantry, strong but confining. You're craving a moment's truth, but the earl's toast and the courtier's eyes are your reality, the system a trap. Like the Victorian court's rigid norms we met. Here's another chuckle. Why was the curtsy so low? Because it bowed Eleanor's dreams lower. You're smiling, but its strained a lady's giggle pulls you back, her flattery a question. You're also connecting the dots. The hall's feasts, the feudal chains, the yard's toil, the stable's lash, the undercroft's hunger, the village's scorn, the square's spells, the church's dogma, the bloodletting's drain, the brew's poison, the surgery's cut, the antechamber's plots, the chamber's birth, the solar's betrayal they've led here, where etiquette's the queen's nightmare. Not just a role, but a life caged, like the wedding night's surrender we faced. You're remembering those gruel tricks, a spark of defiance for serfs, and how they align with this hidden dagger, small fights in a crushing world. You're thinking of other queens consorts, regents their courts like yours, each curtsy, a shared wound, their pain a mirror to the struggle we've carried since the veil's first pinch. Now choked by this decorum's grip, as you take your seat, the earl's toast ringing. You're aching for a voice unscripted, the hall's splendor. A cage, the etiquette's rules a weight you can't shed, like the wound's ache. You're starting to see the bigger picture. This isn't just protocol, it's a prison, making queenship a nightmare by binding your every move, driven by tradition and control. You're thinking of those state gloves, stifling your hands, like the laudanum-like herbs that dulled other struggles, and how they reflect a society that crowned queens but silenced them. You're wondering about the queen you'll be, if you'll master this dance or stumble, and the thousands who've sat here before, their lives lost in the toasts. The taper dims, the feast hums, and you're carrying this suffocating burden. Ready to probe the religious guilt that oppressed your soul, a dogma as cruel as the court's gaze. One last joke to ease us forward. Why was etiquette so strict? Because it loved Eleanor's chains more. You're raising your goblet, the gloves tight, as the hall's glow deepens, with court etiquette's constraints heavy in your heart. You're ready to face the religious guilt that burdened you. A nightmare as tight as the throne's grip. You're kneeling on the cold stone floor of the castle's private chapel, the air heavy with the scent of frankincense and the faint must of ancient prayer books. Stacked on a carved lectern, a single candle flickers, casting trembling shadows on a stained glass window of a stern-faced saint, and you're Eleanor, a queen in the 13th century. Your silk gown pooling as you clasp a rosary, its beads worn smooth. The great hall's suffocating etiquette we navigated still binds your gestures. But here, the weight of divine judgment presses harder. The dagger from the solar's betrayal, a cold secret against your thigh. The childbirth's agony, and the court's plots are raw memories. But now you're wrestling with a deeper dread. the church's oppressive grip on your soul. You're here to probe the religious guilt that tormented medieval queens. A nightmare of sin and scrutiny that made your life a trial, as crushing as the feudal lash we felt in serfdom's tale. This is the chain of piety, and you're feeling its burden, heavy as the cross above, sharp as the priest's accusing chant echoing through the nave. The mainstream fact is that the medieval church, from the 11th to 15th centuries, imposed intense religious expectations on queens, demanding they embody piety and virtue as moral exemplars. As documented in ecclesiastical texts like the Speculum Dominorum 13th century, you were to pray daily, fund monasteries, and uphold Christian ideals. With any perceived sin, ambition, anger, even barrenness seen as divine disfavor, risking your soul and crown. You're murmuring a prayer, the priest's sermon on woman's frailty stinging, and you're haunted, fearing your political maneuvers we played in the antechamber, or your labor's screams we endured might damn you. The court's etiquette we danced through, now a spiritual test. The bloodlettings pain we faced in medicine's tale a physical wound. Compared to this soul's torment, your queenship a vigil under God's eye. But here's a quirky tidbit. Queens often carried relic pouches, tiny silk bags holding saintly fragments like a bone chip or cloth worn to guard against sin, believed to secure divine favor. In the 13th century, monastic records list these, gifted to royals. For penance, you're fingering one at your waist, its contents rattling, and grinning. It's like a medieval lucky charm, holier than those state gloves we tugged in the hall. You're half tempted to clutch it tighter, hoping it'll absolve your doubts. But the priest's glare and the rosary's weight keep you focused. The gilt's hold as firm as the taste testers we relied on, a fear no relic can ease. Historians still argue whether this religious guilt was a deliberate tool to control queens, or a cultural norm reflecting medieval piety, with no clear intent in sermons or royal letters. Some, citing church authority, say it was crafted to limit your power, enforcing humility. Others, noting widespread devotion, argue it was a universal expectation, like the superstition's grip we saw in medicine. You're bowing lower, the stone bruising your knees, and wondering if the priest's words chain you for God or for men. The great hall's intrigues, the childbirth's toll, and the solar's betrayal we face, now a fevered sin you must confess. The wedding nights, shame we felt a softer burden than this divine judgment. Your soul a pawn in heaven's court. Time for a quick joke. Why was the relic pouch so sacred? Because it hid Eleanor's sins in style. You're chuckling, but it's hush, the priest's chant drowns it, and you're wary of a nun's passing shadow. You're gripping the rosary, the chapel's chill seeping in, as you take in the scene. Picture the scene. The chapel's a solemn crypt, with vaulted arches, a marble altar, and a reliquary glinting with holy bones, a far cry from the hall's feasting or the solar's tense whispers. You're not in the field's mud or the healer's den. You're in a divine courtroom, where religious guilt reigns. The priest's preaching your ambition's a sin. Your child's survival a test makes your heart race, claiming your soul's at stake, while nuns offer relic prayers we mocked, believing they'll cleanse you. But the guilt deepens. The humoral theory's cuts we survived, now a spiritual wound. The feudal systems yoke a sacred duty, like the ignorance that bound souls in other tales. The guilt isn't just faith, it's a chain binding your heart. The laudanum like herbs we met a faint echo as this dogma torments your soul. Though you pray, Eleanor's grit your core, step closer to the altar and notice the details. The cool wax under your fingers, the faint hum of Latin, the way the pouch's silk brushes your skin. A false comfort. This chapel's a haven, like those task chants we hummed for serfs. But it's a trap, a place where your crown's a sin, not a glory. You're thinking of that dagger, how it guards your life, and how this guilt sins of power, pride, survival mirrors the betrayal's shadow we faced, each prayer wound to your spirit. You're wondering why your rule's a fault, why God judges your heart. The myths of noble lords we heard are cruel kin to this theology, strong but oppressive. You're craving absolution, but the altar's cold, the system a cage, like the Victorian church's weight we met. Here's another chuckle. Why was the rosary so stern? Because it counted Eleanor's sins, not her hopes. You're smiling, but it's grim. The nun's step pulls you back, her piety a warning. You're also connecting the hall's feasts, the feudal chains, the yard's toil, the stable's lash, the undercroft's hunger, the village's scorn, the square's spells, the antechamber's plots, the chamber's birth, the solar's betrayal, the hall's etiquette they've led here, where religious guilt's the queen's nightmare, not just a role but a soul judged, like the wedding night's surrender we faced. You're remembering those cruel tricks, a spark of defiance for serfs, and how they align with this hidden dagger, small fights in a crushing world. You're thinking of other queens consorts, regents their prayers like yours. Each beat a shared wound, their pain a mirror to the struggle we've carried since the veil's first pinch. Now burdened by this divine yoke, as you rise from your knees, the priest's chant fading, you're aching for a faith that frees. The chapel's stone a cage, the religious guilt a weight you can't shed, like the wounds rot. You're starting to see the bigger picture. This isn't just piety, it's control. Making queenship a nightmare by chaining your soul. Driven by faith and fear, you're thinking of those relic pouches, promising salvation, like the laudanum, like herbs that dulled other struggles, and how they reflect a society that crowned queens but damned them. You're wondering about the queen you'll be, if you'll bear this guilt or defy it. And the thousands who've knelt here before, their souls lost in the wax. The candle dims, the hall calls, and you're carrying this oppressive burden, ready to delve into the isolation that haunted your life, a loneliness as cruel as the priest's gaze. One last joke to ease us forward. Why was the prayer so heavy? Because it loved Eleanor's soul more. You're slipping from the chapel, the rosary left behind. As the nave's hush deepens, with religious guilt's oppression heavy in your heart, you're ready to explore the isolation that can find you, a nightmare as stark as the throne's shadow. You're seated alone on a cushioned bench in a high-towered chamber of the medieval castle, the air cool with the scent of aged vellum from a small bookshelf, and the faint draft slipping through a narrow arrow-slit window. A single oil lamp casts a soft glow on a half-finished embroidery of a rose, its needle glinting like the dagger you still carry, a relic of the solar's betrayal. You're Eleanor, a queen in the 13th century, your velvet gown heavy as you trace the rosary's absence. From the chapel's guilt we wrestled with the great hall's etiquette, a distant hum below, the childbirth's pain, and the court's plots linger. But here, the silence is louder, a void that mirrors your heart's ache. You're here to delve into the isolation that haunted medieval queens, a nightmare of loneliness that made your gilded life a prison, as stark as the feudal lash we felt in serfdom's tale. This is the hush of solitude, and you're feeling its chill, heavy as the tower's stone, sharp as the wind's lonely howl outside. The mainstream fact is that medieval queens, from the 11th to 15th centuries, often lived in profound isolation, separated from family and friends by political marriages and court duties. As noted in royal letters and chronicles like those of Christine de Pizan, 14th century, You were sent to foreign courts to wed kings like Henry, cut off from your homeland, surrounded by courtiers whose loyalty we questioned in the solar, with few true confidants. Your role demanding a facade of strength that left you emotionally adrift. You're gazing at the embroidery, its rows unfinished, and you're hollow, missing your mother's voice or a friend's laugh. The chapel's guilt we bore, now a solitude that cuts deeper. The bloodlettings drain we faced in medicines. Tale of physical ache compared to this heart's void. Your queenship a lonely throne. But here's a quirky tidbit. Queens sometimes kept companion birds, like finches or larks, in gilded cages as their only constant companions, believed to soothe melancholy. In the 13th century, castle inventories list these. Fed by royal hands. You're eyeing a tiny cage by the window, its lark trilling softly and grinning. It's like a medieval Tamagotchi, sweeter than those relic pouches we clutched in the chapel. You're half tempted to open the cage, letting it fly free. But the bird's song and the tower's silence keep you still. The isolation's ache is real as the taste testers we relied on. A loneliness no lark can lift. Historians still argue whether this isolation was a deliberate strategy to weaken queens, or an unintended consequence of their role. With no clear intent in court diaries or correspondence, some, citing political marriages, say it was engineered to limit your alliances, ensuring dependence. Others, noting court dynamics, argue it was a byproduct of your elevated status. Like the church's grip we saw, you're threading the needle, the rose's petals blurring, and wondering if this solitude's a plot or a price. The great hall's intrigues, the childbirth's toll, and the solar's betrayal we faced, now a fevered loneliness you can't escape. The wedding nights. Confinement we felt a softer cage than this tower's hush. Your heart a pawn in silence's game, time for a quick joke. Why was the lark so chatty? Because it sang Eleanor's secrets to the wind. You're chuckling, but its hushed, the lamp's flicker drowns it, and you're wary of a guard's step below. You're setting the needle down, the tower's chill wrapping you, as you take in the scene. Picture the scene. The chamber's a lofty cell, with a small hearth's embers, a woven rug, and the arrow slit framing a starlit sky. A far cry from the hall's feasting or the chapel's stone nave. You're not in the field's mud or the healer's den. You're in a gilded exile, where isolation's the law. You're a queen, exalted yet alone. Your court full of barons we dodged in the antechamber, offering flattery but no friendship. The childbirth screams we survived, now a silent echo. The feudal system's yoke a solitary crown, like the ignorance that bound souls in other tales. The loneliness isn't just absence. It's a wall, cutting you from warmth. The laudanum-like herbs we met, a faint echo as this solitude numbs your soul. Though you sit, Eleanor's grit your core, step closer to the window, and notice the details. The cold stone under your palm, the faint trill of the lark, the way the embroideries thread phrase. A mark of your stalled heart. This tower's a refuge, like those task chants we hummed for serfs. But it's desolate, a place where your crown's a sentence. You're thinking of that dagger, how it guards your life. And how this isolation empty hours, silent nights mirrors. The betrayal's shadow we faced, each moment a wound to your spirit. You're wondering why your throne's so solitary, why even your ladies keep their distance. The myths of noble lords we heard a cruel kin to this exile, strong but isolating. You're craving connection, but the lark's song and the tower's walls are your reality. The system a cage, like the Victorian Queen's seclusion we met. Here's another chuckle. Why was the tower so quiet? Because it hushed Eleanor's heart louder. You're smiling, but it's grim. The guard's step pulls you back. his presence a reminder of your guard. You're also connecting the hall's feasts, the feudal chains, the yard's toil, the stable's lash, the undercroft's hunger, the village's scorn, the square's spells, the church's dogma, the bloodletting's drain, the bruise poison, the surgery's cut, the antechamber's plots, the chamber's birth, the solar's betrayal, the hall's etiquette they've led here, where isolation's the queen's nightmare, not just a role but a soul confined, like the wedding night's surrender we faced. You're remembering those gruel tricks, a spark of defiance for serfs, and how they align with this lark's song, small fights in a crushing world. You're thinking of other queens consorts, regents their towers like yours, each silence, a shared wound, their pain a mirror to the struggle we've carried since the veil's first pinch, now deepened by this lonely hush. As you rise from the bench, the lark's drill softening, you're aching for a voice to share this. The towers glow a prison, the isolation's ache a weight you can't shed, like the wounds rot. You're starting to see the bigger picture. This isn't just solitude, it's a sentence, making queenship a nightmare by severing your heart, driven by duty and distance. You're thinking of those companion birds, singing to no one, like the laudanum-like herbs that dulled other struggles, and how they reflect a society that crowned queens but left them alone. You're wondering about the queen you'll be, if you'll endure this silence or break, and the thousands who've sat here before, their hearts lost in the shadows. The lamp dims, the hall stirs, and you're carrying this lonely burden, ready to face the physical dangers that loomed nearby, a violence as cruel as the tower's hush. One last joke to ease us forward. Why was the lark so lonely? Because it loved Eleanor's tears more. You're stepping to the door, the embroidery left behind, as the tower's hush deepens, with isolation's ache heavy in your heart. You're ready to explore the violence that threatened you, a nightmare as stark as the throne's shadow. You're hurrying down a torchlit spiral staircase in the medieval castle, the air sharp with the scent of damp stone and the faint metallic tang of armor polished for a looming tournament. The clank of a guard's sword echoes below, and you're Eleanor, a queen in the 13th century, your velvet gown catching on rough walls as you clutch the dagger from the solar's betrayal. Its weight a grim comfort. The tower's lonely hush we lingered in still clings, but now a new fear quickens your pulse. The creak of a loose step could be an assassin's tread. The childbirth's agony, the court's etiquette, and the chapel's guilt are raw scars. But here, physical danger stalks you. You're here to face the violence that threatened medieval queens, a nightmare of swords, poison, and sieges that made your life a battlefield, as brutal as the feudal lash we felt in serfdom's tale. This is the edge of peril, and you're feeling its bite, heavy as the dagger's hilt, sharp as the shadows shifting on the stair. The mainstream fact is that medieval queens faced significant physical dangers from the 11th to 15th centuries, including assassination attempts, kidnappings, or injuries during court conflicts or wars, as documented in chronicles like those of William of Malmesbury 12th century. Your role as a consort or regent we saw in the Great Hall made you a target for rivals barons, rebels, or foreign foes who saw your death or capture as a path to power, with castles offering little safety amid sieges or treachery. You're glancing over your shoulder, the guard's silhouette below uncertain, and you're tense, knowing a blade could come from a trusted knight or a poison cup. The betrayal's shadow we uncovered in the solar now a tangible threat. The bloodletting's drain we endured in medicine's tale a slow harm compared to this sudden violence. Your queenship a magnet for swords. But here's a quirky tidbit. Queens sometimes wore charmed brooches, silver pins engraved with protective runes, believed to deflect blades or curses, a talisman against violence. In the 13th century, jewelers' records note these, crafted for royal women. You're touching one pin to your gown, its sharp edge a faint shield, and grinning it's like a medieval panic button, flashier than the companion birds we heard in the tower. You're half tempted to press it, hoping for magic, but the creaks louder, and the guard's step quickens. The violence's threat as real as the taste testers we relied on, a danger no charm can stop. Historians still argue whether these dangers were targeted at queens specifically or part of broader medieval instability, with no clear pattern in court records or chronicles. Some, citing assassination plots, say your gender and power made you uniquely vulnerable. Others, noting widespread violence, argue queens faced risks no greater than kings. Like the church's grip we saw, you're gripping the dagger, the staircase narrowing, and wondering if this threat's personal or just the era's chaos. The great hall's intrigues, the childbirth's toll, and the tower's isolation we faced, now a fevered peril you must outrun. The wedding night's fears we felt a softer dread than this blade's glint. Your life a wager on each step. Time for a quick joke. Why was the charmed brooch so sparkly? Because it dazzled Eleanor's assassins away. You're chuckling, but it's hushed, the guard's cough drowns it. His loyalty a question. You're descending faster, the torch's heat fading, as you take in the scene. Picture the scene. The staircase is a coiling trap, with slick steps, iron torch brackets, and shadows twisting like threats. A far cry from the tower's quiet bench or the chapel's stone nave. You're not in the field's mud or the healer's den. You're in a gauntlet of violence, where danger's the law. You're a queen, but also prey. Your throne tied to the plots we dodged in the antechamber, drawing killers. From knights with hidden blades to rebels storming walls. The humoral theory's cuts we survived, now a sharper slice of steel. The feudal systems yoke a deadly dance, like the ignorance that bound souls in other tales. The dangers aren't just risks, they're a siege, tightening with each creak. The laudanum like herbs we met a faint echo as this violence threatens your breath. Though you move, Eleanor's grit your core. Step closer to a torch and notice the details. The warm flames crackle, the faint scrape of your gown, the way the brooch's runes catch the light, a frail hope. This staircase is a battlefield, like those task chants we hummed for serfs. But it's lethal, a place where your crown's a target. You're thinking of that dagger, how it guards your life, and how violent swords, poison, sieges mirrors. The betrayal's shadow we faced, each step a wound to your safety. You're wondering why your reign invites blades, why even guards might turn. The myths of noble lords we heard a cruel kin to this savagery, strong but deadly. You're craving safety, but the creak's closer, the system a death trap, like the Victorian court's perils we met. Here's another chuckle. Why was the guard so shifty? Because he loved Eleanor's crown more than her life. You're smiling, but it's grim, the torch's flicker pulls you back. Its light a warning. You're also connecting the hall's feasts, the feudal chains, the yard's toil, the stable's lash, the undercroft's hunger, the village's scorn, the square's spells, the church's dogma, the bloodletting's drain, the brew's poison, the surgery's cut, the antechamber's plots, the chamber's birth, the solar's betrayal, the hall's etiquette, the chapel's guilt they've led here, where violence is the queen's nightmare, not just a role but a life hunted, like the wedding night's surrender we faced. You're remembering those cruel tricks, a spark of defiance for serfs, and how they align with this dagger's grip. Small fights in a crushing world. You're thinking of other queens consorts, regents their courts like yours, each threat a shared wound, their pain a mirror to the struggle we've carried since the veil's first pinch. Now pierced by this violent edge as you reach the stair's base, the guard's shadow looming. You're gripping the dagger tighter, the staircase's gloom a trap, the violence's threat a weight you can't shed, like the fever's fire. You're starting to see the bigger picture. This isn't just danger, it's a crucible, making queenship a nightmare by surrounding you with blades. Driven by chaos and greed, you're thinking of those charmed brooches, warding nothing, like the laudanum-like herbs that dulled other struggles, and how they reflect a society that crowned queens but endangered them. You're wondering about the queen you'll be, if you'll outrun this blade or fall. And the thousands who've walked here before, their lives lost in the shadows. The torch dims, the hall nears, and you're carrying this perilous burden, ready to discover the limited agency that frustrated your rule. A constraint as cruel as the guard's gaze. One last joke to ease us forward. Why was the dagger so loyal? Because it guarded Eleanor's heart better. You're stepping into the hall, the guard passing, as the staircase's hush fades, with violence's threat heavy in your heart. You're ready to explore the limited agency that can find you, a nightmare as stark as the throne's shadow. You're standing in the castle's council chamber, the air thick with the scent of melted wax from flickering candles, and the faint dust of ancient charters spread across a heavy oak table. The clink of goblets echoes from the great hall. But here, the low murmur of barons and advisors debating war taxes drowns it out, their eyes darting to you with measured respect or veiled disdain. You're Eleanor, a queen in the 13th century, your velvet gown stiff as you clutch a sealed petition. It's parchment a plea to fund a hospital, the dagger from the staircase's violent threat still hidden in your sleeve. The tower's isolation and the chapel's guilt linger, but now you're grappling with a different chain, the suffocating limits of your power. You're here to discover the limited agency that frustrated medieval queens, a nightmare of constrained influence that made your rule a shadow, as binding as the feudal lash we felt in serfdom's tale. This is the cage of queenship, and you're feeling its bars, heavy as the petition's weight, sharp as the baron's skeptical glances. The mainstream fact is that medieval queens, from the 11th to 15th centuries, had limited legal and political agency, with their authority often derived from husbands, sons, or regency roles, as noted in legal codes like the Assizes of Jerusalem 12th century. You could influence diplomacy or patronage, as we saw in the antechamber's plots, but major decisions, war, law, finance required male approval, leaving you a figurehead in many matters, your voice muted by feudal patriarchy. You're presenting the petition, your voice steady but ignored as a baron interrupts, and you're frustrated, knowing your hospital could save lives but needs Henry's seal. The violence's threat we dodged on the staircase now a subtler, wound to your will. The bloodlettings drain we faced in medicine's tale of physical harm compared to this clipped power. Your queenship a throne with no scepter. But here's a quirky tidbit. Queens sometimes used seal matrices, small engraved stamps for wax seals, to assert influence through unofficial letters, bypassing male gatekeepers. In the 13th century, royal inventories list these, often hidden in jewelry. You're fingering one disguised as a brooch. It's crust ready to mark your petition, and grinning it's like a medieval hack, sneakier than the charmed brooches we pinned against violence. You're half tempted to stamp the petition now, claiming authority. But the baron's frowns and Henry's distant throne keep you cautious. The agency's limit as firm as the taste testers we relied on. A power no seal can fully wield. Historians, still argue whether Queen's limited agency was a deliberate curb on female power, or a structural flaw of feudal governance, with no clear intent in charters or chronicles. Some, citing misogynistic laws, say it was crafted to keep you dependent, reinforcing male rule. Others, noting regent queens, argue it varied by circumstance, like the church's grip we saw. You're clutching the petition, the council's debate drowning you out, and wondering if this leash is personal or just the system's weight. The great hall's intrigues, the childbirth's toll, and the tower's isolation we've faced, now a fevered fight for a voice. The wedding night's powerlessness we felt, a prelude to this muted reign. Your will a pawn in patriarchy's game. Time for a quick joke. Why was the seal matrix so small? Because it hid Eleanor's power in plain sight. You're chuckling, but its hushed, a baron's cough drowns it, his skepticism a warning. You're stepping back, the charter's dust settling, as you take in the scene. Picture the scene. The council chamber's a stern arena, with tapestries of battles, a roaring hearth, and barons in fur cloaks. A far cry from the staircase's perilous spiral or the chapel's stone nave. You're not in the field's mud or the healer's den. You're in a hall of power, where agency's a mirage. You're a queen, but your voice sharp in the antechamber's plot carries little weight here. Your petition for a hospital dismissed as woman's whimsy. The childbirth screams we survived now. A silent plea. The feudal systems yoke a male council, like the ignorance that bound souls in other tales. The limits aren't just rules. They're a cage, clipping your wings. The laudanum-like herbs we met, a faint echo as this constraint binds your soul, though you stand. Eleanor's grit your core. Step closer to the table and notice the details. The cool parchment under your fingers, the faint crackle of the hearth, the way the matrix's crest gleams, a spark of defiance. This chamber's a battlefield, like those task chants we hummed for serfs, but it's cerebral, a place where your crown's a shadow. You're thinking of that dagger, how it guards your life, and how this limited agency petition's ignored. Decrees vetoed mirrors the violence's threat we faced, each dismissal a wound to your rule. You're wondering why your wisdom's less than a baron's, why your hospital must wait for Henry's nod. The myths of noble lords we heard, a cruel kin to this patriarchy, strong but stifling. You're craving influence, but the barons' voices and the council's din are your reality, the system a trap. Like the Victorian queen's curtailed power we met. Here's another chuckle. Why was the petition so quiet? Because it whispered Eleanor's dreams to deaf ears. You're smiling, but its grim scribe's quill scratch pulls you back. His notes a record of your silence. You're also connecting the hall's feasts, the feudal chains, the yard's toil, the stable's lash, the undercroft's hunger, the village's scorn, the square's spells, the church's dogma, the bloodletting's drain, the bruise poison, the surgery's cut, the antechamber's plots, the chamber's birth, the solar's betrayal, the hall's etiquette, the chapel's guilt, the tower's isolation, the staircase's threat they've led here, where limited agency's the queen's nightmare, not just a role but a will chained. Like the wedding night's surrender we faced, you're remembering those cruel tricks, a spark of defiance for serfs, and how they align with this matrix's stamp. Small fights in a crushing world. You're thinking of other queens consorts, regents, their councils like yours, each plea a shared wound, their pain a mirror to the struggle we've carried since the veil's first pinch. Now crushed by this muted power, as you fold the petition, the barons' debate raging. You're aching for a voice that counts. The chambers glow a cage. The agency's limits a weight you can't shed, like the fever's fire. You're starting to see the bigger picture. This isn't just constraint, it's a theft, making queenship a nightmare by denying your will. Driven by patriarchy and tradition, you're thinking of those seal matrices, stealing scraps of power, like the laudanum-like herbs that dulled other struggles, and how they reflect a society that crowned queens but silenced them. You're wondering about the queen you'll be, if you'll carve out power or fade. And the thousands who've stood here before, their voices lost in the charters. The candle dims, the hall stirs, and you're carrying this frustrated burden, ready to reflect on the legacy of royal nightmares, a mark as cruel as the council's scorn. One last joke to ease us forward. Why was the council so loud? Because it loved drowning Eleanor's voice. You're stepping from the table, the petition tucked close, as the chamber's hush deepens. With limited agency's frustration heavy in your heart, you're ready to explore the legacy of queenship's nightmares, a shadow that shaped a world. You're perched on a carved stone bench in the castle's quiet garden, the air soft with the scent of blooming roses and the faint dampness of dew on cobblestone pots. Dawn's golden light filters through ancient oaks, casting dappled shadows. And you're Eleanor, a queen in the 13th century, your velvet gown trailing as you hold a faded letter from a long-dead predecessor. Its words a warning of the betrayals we've faced in the solar. The council chamber's stifled voice still stings, but here, in this fleeting piece, you're reflecting on the legacy of royal nightmares, how the trials of medieval queens' politics, childbirth, isolation, violence shaped society and echoed through time. The childbirth's agony, the court's etiquette, and the chapel's guilt are woven into your crown's weight, a tapestry of struggle. You're here to trace the lasting impact of these burdens, a mark as enduring as the feudal lash we felt in serfdom's tale. This is the echo of queenship, and you're feeling its resonance, gentle as the breeze, heavy as the letter's faded ink. The mainstream fact is that the challenges faced by medieval queens, from the 11th to 15th centuries, left a significant legacy on European society, influencing gender roles, political structures, and cultural narratives. As documented in chronicles like those of Agnes Strickland, 19th century, reflecting earlier sources. Your struggles navigating plots we dodged in the antechamber, surviving births we endured, bearing isolation we mourned highlighted women's precarious power, inspiring reforms like Stronger Dowager, rights and tales of figures like Eleanor of Aquitaine, shaping views on female rule. You're unfolding the letter, its tale of a queen's defiance stirring you, and you're seeing your pain, from the staircase's violence to the council's limits. As a thread in this shift, the seal matrix's stamp we wielded a spark for a world where queens might reign, unlike the medical misery's legacy we explored. But here's a quirky tidbit. Queen's trials inspired lament ballads, mournful songs sung in courts about your loneliness or betrayals, preserved in 14th century manuscripts. These melodies, like the sorrow songs we heard in serfdom, gave voice to your pain, echoing in taverns we passed. You're humming one now, its notes soft, and grinning it's like a medieval heartbreak playlist, rawer than those companion birds we tended in the tower. You're half tempted to sing louder, claiming your story, but a gardener's rustle nearby keeps you quiet. The legacy's weight deeper than the council's scorn we faced, a mark no ballad can fully sing. Historians still argue whether Queen's nightmares drove lasting change, or were overshadowed by male-dominated history, with no clear verdict in royal chronicles or legal reforms. Some, citing figures like Matilda, say your resilience reshaped succession laws and female agency. Others, noting persistent patriarchy, argue your impact was muted, like the church's grip we saw. You're gazing at the roses, their thorns sharp, and wondering if your trials, from the childbirth's peril to the staircase's threat, mattered, or if their whispers in time, the great hall's intrigues, the chapel's guilt, and the tower's isolation we faced, now a fevered legacy that faded. The wedding night's pain we felt, a softer scar than this crowned struggle. Your life a flicker in history's weave. Time for a quick joke. Why was the lament ballad so sad? Because it wailed Eleanor's crown away. You're chuckling, but its soft a bird's chirp drowns it, and you're wary of a guard's distant step. You're settling deeper on the bench, the letter crinkling, as you take in the scene. Picture the scene. The garden's a serene haven, with rose bushes in bloom, a trickling fountain, and dawn's light painting the stones. A far cry from the council chamber's stern debate, or the staircase's perilous spiral. You're not in the field's mud or the healer's den. You're in a space of reflection, where queenship's legacy blooms. Your life dodging plots we schemed in the antechamber. Surviving births, bearing etiquette's chains we danced. Wasn't just pain, it was a force, shaping laws, tales, and hearts, from charters to ballads. The violence's threat we fled, a spark for change, like the sisterhood's courage in other tales. You're feeling the ripple, how you're suffering, tied to the church's dogma and baron's betrayal. Nudged society to see queens as more than pawns, a shift as slow as the dawn's rise. Step closer to the fountain and notice the details. The cool mist on your skin, the faint hum of bees, the way the letter's ink fades. A trace of your fight. This garden's a bridge, like those task chants we hummed for serfs. But it's timeless, weaving your pain into history's cloth. You're thinking of that betrayal's note, how it scarred you, and how its echo fueled songs that questioned such treachery, or the council's limits. A silence that sparked stronger queens, the feudal chains we plowed through, breaking link by link. You're wondering about other queens consorts, regents, their trials like yours, their ballads sung in courts, their defiance shaping a world where women might rule. A legacy from the chamber's blood to tomorrow's hope. Here's another chuckle. Why was the legacy so deep? Because it grew from Eleanor's tears. You're smiling, but it's tender. The dawn's glow feels like promise, a new day's hope. You're also connecting the dots, the hall's feasts, the feudal chains, the yard's toil, the stable's lash, the undercroft's hunger, the village's scorn, the square's spells, the church's dogma, the bloodletting's drain, the bruise poison, the surgery's cut, the antechamber's plots, the chamber's birth, the solar's betrayal, the hall's etiquette, the chapel's guilt, the tower's isolation, the staircase's threat, the council's limits. They've led here, where queenship's nightmares left a mark. From songs to reforms, a legacy of pain turned to progress. You're remembering those laudanum like herbs, numbing other struggles, and how your fight outshone them, a spark that echoes in freer reigns. You're thinking of queens who followed, their thrones less chained, their lives built on your scars. Each pain a seed for change. Now, let's let the world soften, the edges fading like a whispered sigh. You're still on that bench, the garden's dawn wrapping you in a gentle embrace. The rose's scent and the letter's words dissolving into the morning's hush. The betrayals, the births, the loneliness, and the plots drift away, leaving a warm ember of your resilience, Eleanor's grit glowing soft. You've walked through halls and towers, carried crowns, fears, and prayers, and that's enough. Picture a quiet meadow, its grasses swaying under dawn's first light, where your struggle, the queen's courage, and countless lives' defiance drift like petals on a breeze. The plots, the chains, the shadows, they're gone, leaving only peace, a world cradling you close. Let the dawn deepen. Let the silence hold you. Your heart's full, your eyes heavy, and the morning's ready to weave you into its dreams. Sleep now, sweet listener, and rest in the glow of stories that endure. Soft as the sunrise ahead,